the next week or so. Back to you both.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
The time is 16 minutes past 8. Now, here on Breakfast, we've heard from former sub-postmasters affected by the Post Office Horizon scandal. They've shared their stories of despair, loss and shame, as well, of course, as their fight for justice.
One of them, who will be very familiar to you, is Lee Castleton, who has now launched his own legal action against the Post Office and Fujitsu. And Lee joins us now alongside his lawyer, Simon Goldberg, who is in our London newsroom. Thank you to both of you for being with us. Lee, there have been so many legal cases, now lots of different compensation schemes. The government, of course, has got involved. Why are you taking your specific own case back to court? Can you explain what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, the schemes aren't fit for purpose, you know, but for me personally, I need vindication. I need to right the wrongs of the past for me personally, as well as help the group. You know, this is another avenue for the group to look at. You've got to do what you feel's right. Because
your name was never fully cleared from the charges
made
against you. No, it still
stands. So the matter of the court in 2007 is still there. It still stands against me, and I'd like to not only get rid of that, obviously overturn that, but I would like it done in the correct way. I think it's really important.
Simon, you're Lee's lawyer in this. Talk to us about what is different about this specific case versus that group action that people will be familiar with.
For sure. So the group action was 555 sub-postmasters led by Alan Bates, now Sir Alan Bates. And that was an action that went on for many, many years. In the end, it was settled before a trial, and the sum of £58 million was paid out. The problem with the settlement was that the vast bulk of that settlement figure went to the funders and the lawyers acting for the postmasters. They were ground into submission, is the best way of describing it, by the Post Office in a deep and limitless pocket. And that meant that all the sub-postmasters, including my client Mr Castleton, received a paltry £20,000. So although portrayed at the time as a victory for the sub-postmasters, it was nothing of the sort. It was a crushing defeat because of the force and might and wealth of the Post Office. So Mr Castleton's case is actually correcting the wrongs that have been done, because there's now an equality of arms in that Mr Castleton has a very strong set of lawyers acting for him, and we're going to take the case all the way if we need to. So it's an entirely different situation. And what Mr Castleton is claiming is, A, for the judgment to be set aside, because we argue it was obtained on the grounds of fraud, which I'll come back to if you would like me to, and B, compensation to Mr Castleton for the wrongs done to him. So an entirely different claim.
Yeah, and just explain that for us. We should be clear there. On what grounds? You say fraud. Just explain it for us.
Yes, of course. So Mr Castleton was acting in person. The Post Office had a firm of lawyers and solicitors and a barrister, and they failed to disclose to Mr Castleton documentary evidence that would have shown the bugs, errors and defects with the Horizon system. They did so in a very deceptive way by saying he couldn't afford to pay for the documents, that he'd be confused by them. In other words, he couldn't have them. So the judge didn't have the evidence before his court to see that Horizon was in fact broken. And the reason for that was the Post Office knew perfectly well that had that evidence come to light, Mr Castleton's claim would have been successful. And the Post Office were not prepared to countenance that under any circumstances.
Now, we should say Fujitsu have not commented on this. The Post Office also won't comment on specific legal cases ongoing, but they say they recognise many victims of the Horizon scandal continue to be impacted by their experience. What the government is saying is that you have this opportunity to receive compensation, and once you put in your application, that will be considered and you will be paid fair redress. Why is that not enough for you?
Because this is about putting things in order in the right way. I feel that to go through the compensation side of things right now without having set aside the original judgment would be the wrong thing to do for Lee Castleton. It's important that I do things in the right order for me. That's, you know, this, as a victim of this, I should be able to say what's important to me, and this is very important to me, and I think it's very important to the group too. You know, the wider group are going through schemes that have been admitted by government not to be fit for purpose. This, you know, the money, whatever this ends up with for Lee Castleton at the end, is irrelevant compared to the process, the trauma of the schemes and the new trauma of going through court. But I'm prepared to deal with that to get the right outcome.
You must be exhausted after all these years of fighting. And I think a lot of people in their heads, having seen the TV show, will be thinking, oh, well, it's all settled and got the compensation scheme and everyone's on your side and, you know, life should be sort of rosy-ish. Can you just give us some insight into what it is still like having to battle day to day to get through the legal system to clear your name?
If you look at just one aspect of all of this, which would be the claims schemes, every single point that you make within your claim is then litigated without a judge. So every single point is asked for with proof and argued and denied by the other side. You go through this traumatic 2, 3, 4 years in some cases to get to the end of that compensation journey. I would like to have a judge in the middle of that for me, so that when I present my case and they present their case, it's not their say-so of what's right and wrong. It's a formal, independent practitioner, a person that's job it is to decide, not their job. I think I deserve that. I think the group deserves that. We've talked about it many times with the government. We've talked about it many times with Post Office. It's time the schemes were changed. It's very one-sided. To be honest, I'm tired of people telling me what to do and what not to do. I think it's about time that we were listened to. The public have been wonderful throughout this. They've listened to us. They've taken us on board. They've warmed to us. I've had thousands and thousands of messages of support from public, from legal people, from all over the globe. But what's important to me and what's important to the group is that the government changes its stance.
Simon, what are the next steps here? You know, Lee's saying there it's about wanting to be listened to. Is that likely? Are you expecting that this will be something that will raise the profile once again, but that Lee will get his hearing, that people will listen?
So, thank you. Yes, I think that Lee will get his hearing, and I think that people are already listening. Insofar as your original question, what are the next steps? Well, proceedings have been issued, but they haven't yet been served on Fujitsu or the Post Office. So both defendants know there is a claim against them. But what happens next entirely depends on, if you like, what they are going to do, what kind of approach they're going to take. The approach that they have taken up to now in relation to litigation is to fight it tooth and claw, which they're doing, incidentally, as Lee just mentioned, in the compensation schemes. And to try and crush whoever they're fighting against, which isn't going to happen this time. So really, Lee will get his day in court unless the matter is settled. And if there is an out-of-court settlement, which is far too early to say, it's got to be at a figure that Lee and his family are comfortable with. It's got to properly compensate him for what's happened. So next steps are a bit vague, especially because we believe that behind the scenes, Fujitsu and Post Office have a standstill agreement which stops them from suing one another. So they're going to be in an awful situation, not knowing what to do. And hopefully they'll come to the table sooner rather than later and stop fighting.
Well, we'll wait to see on that one. And just finally, Lee, you get your OBE in a few weeks, don't you? Which will be an amazing occasion.
Yeah.
But how much do you look forward to being just plain old Lee Castleton, getting on with his life?
I am Lee Castleton, getting on with my life.
You are?
This is just in the background. And, I can't tell you how important it'll be the day that I no longer think about Post Office as the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. It'll be a wonderful day, and I shall celebrate it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for talking to us, and thank you to Simon as well. Appreciate
Thank
your
you
time
very
this
much.
morning.